to the Book of Mormon Evidence podcast with host Rod Meldrum. This week's Come Follow Me supplemental study is Lesson 34, Helaman 7 through 12. Remember the Lord. Rod's guest on this podcast is James T. Prout, the author of the book The Last Days Timeline. He's an expert on the specific Last Days events and the founder of LastDaysTimeline.com. Find out how you can prepare your family for the next events in the sequence. Prophecy is simply the future shown to the prophets of God in advance. Why not help your family by showing the signs of the times before they happen? James has spent 20 years studying the scriptures and other authors. He pulls out the nuggets of truth and cuts through the clutter that has been recorded surrounding prophecy of the end times leading to the second coming of Jesus Christ. Let him help you discover the next domino to fall so you can prepare your family for the next event in the sequence.
Welcome, everybody. We are very excited about this week's podcast. I have with me James T. Prout. He is a expert on some last days timelines and things like that, and we're going to have some really interesting discussion. But this lesson, again, we're just working with the Come Follow Me manual, and this is the lesson about Helaman chapter 7 through 12. So we're going to be talking about some amazing things that are happening here, and I wanted to start off a little bit with just a quick little understanding here as far as where we're at here. A lot of people want to know about, in fact, almost everybody wants to know, when you read the Book of Mormon, you realize that it's a timeline, it's a chronological history of the ancient people here in America, but it has some interesting parallelisms. And how do we get those parallelisms? I want to go for just a second to a couple of scriptures here. If we go to Mormon chapter 8, verses 35 and 36. And we're just going to go with verse 35 here for just a second. But it says, "Behold, I speak unto you as if you were present, and yet you are not. But behold, Jesus Christ has shown you unto me, and I know you're doing." And then he goes in and he basically describes what is happening with us. I mean, he basically has been shown our day. He takes their history and he basically pulls out the important portions of their history to be able to then give us kind of a foreshadowing, if you will, of what's going to be happening in the United States today. And then I want to point out just one other thing here. This is the Book of Mormon Prophetic Parallels Timeline. This is done by the Joseph Smith Foundation and the Stoddards. And so if you realize that we are actually in this timeline, and the timeline parallels the United States of America. So you have the Book of Mormon and the United States of America have a parallel history going on here. Then we know that we're somewhere close to the time of when Christ comes. So I wanted to bring in James here to talk a little bit about. So when people ask about where we're at in the timeline, what kind of things do you talk about?
Well, first I want to say thanks, Rod, for having me on, and thanks everybody for joining today. The timeline is a prophetic business, right? It's about knowing what happens in the Book of Mormon, what happens in all of the scriptures together, put it into a sequential pattern, if you will, that makes sense, and then to be able to show in the scriptures exactly what happens next. Because what's the point of prophecy if you don't know what happens next and prepare for it for you and your own family?
That's right, which is the whole reason for prophecy. I didn't really give you much of a chance to introduce yourself. Would you mind just giving us just a little introduction there?
Sure.
I didn't do that.
James T. Prout, author of The Last Days Timeline here, and it was authored in late 2016, early 2017, and I've been on YouTube and videos and
spoken at conferences,
lots of conferences, and private meetings and big meetings and all over the country now. And we've got books and products sold in all continents of the world, and in I think over maybe 50 countries now. So, and we're translating into Spanish just to go for more countries for the purpose of spreading the news that we now know where we are in the timeline, and we know where we are in the Book of Mormon timeline, which is what we're talking about today.
Awesome. Yeah. And by the way, if you would like to get, because of these, and you may be wondering, because many of these have gone quite long, so you might be wondering, well, gosh, did you cover everything? Believe me, we're just touching the very surface. And if you'd like to get more in-depth information, you can go to, in fact, you've spoken at our conferences several times now.
Yeah, since 2000.
Yeah, a bunch of times there. So if you'd like to get additional information, if you're one of our members of our Book of Mormon Evidence streaming site, you can go and watch the full presentations that you've done over the last several years. So we're excited about being able to send people there and have additional resource. If what you hear in this podcast today is it strikes your fancy, you want to learn more about what's coming up and how to prepare for it, then I suggest you go to the Book of Mormon Evidence streaming site and check it out. Get the copies of the books that we're going to be talking about here also today. But let's just kind of dive into a couple of things here. And this is going to be actually from this. We're going to start here in Helaman chapter 7.
All right, let's hit it.
All right, we're going to hit it. All right, here we go. So in in verse 4, I have this up here on my on the screen here. It's interesting because in many times you have Mormon basically who takes huge chunks of time and puts it in just a couple of verses. But in this particular area, he has slowed it way down, and now we're getting an in-depth, detailed history of what's going on in their civilization right at the moment in time. And this is right before Christ comes now, and the bottom line is that if this is a parallel history, then this might be giving us some clues here as to what kind of things we might be expecting to have in the latter days here. So verse 4, I'm going to just kind of run through a couple of these. Now, this is actually a part of called the Book of Mormon Current as the Daily News, which is the DVD that we have here. And I'm going to play a little section of that here in just a couple minutes. But let's just kind of go over some of the things that they were saying was happening in the civilization right before Christ came. So he says, and seeing the people in such a state of awful wickedness. Okay, and so what I did is I actually did these little segments of these verses here, pulled them out as a phrase, and then put it into a Google search, and then actually went and put that into looked under mainstream media titles of articles to see what would come up just out of curiosity, and it was absolutely astounding what I was finding here. So when it talks about in a state of awful wickedness, as you know, this we were recording this right now. It's in July, okay, but this is going to not come out until
that looks like
August.
Some awful wickedness right there.
And looks like some awful wickedness going on here. Also, here's some different things going on. Just different ideas of what that awful wickedness may be. Gadiant and robbers filling the judgment seats. Here's the Huffington Post talking about America's political system thrives on corruption. Or Los Angeles Times, the United States judges see epidemic of prosecutorial misconduct in the state. Talking about here, this is the Brett Kavanaugh debacle, about the deep state wears black robes. That's a book that had come out. That goes back to Helaman. It says that having usurped the power and authority of the land. And we have Heritage Foundation talking about overreaching judges imperil national security and weaken the Constitution. Laying aside the commandments of God. And, of course, we know about the Supreme Court and the barring of commandments from courthouses, and this is from, just different examples here of the Ten Commandments being removed. Political, they have Oklahoma Supreme Court orders 10 Commandments removed from the Capitol. Supreme Court backs removal of 10 Commandments monuments and so forth throughout the United States. It says, not in the least aright before him. I thought this was interesting. When I pulled that up, it came up with Americans worry about moral decline, but they can't agree on what's actually right and wrong. No idea about morality here. 81% agree. Talking about National Review, America's accelerating decay. The steepening decline is evident in the family, education, morality, and art. Majority of Americans believe the U.S. is in moral decline. Then it talks about no justice unto the children of men. And this is interesting thing, just showing that by presidential administrations, that Republican presidencies have 91 convictions of misconduct and so forth in the judicial system, but Democrats have 0. which obviously means that the Republicans are a lot more wicked than the Democrats, right? Or maybe there's something going on with the judicial system. Okay, so there's something going on there. But American Spectator, Republicans go to jail, Democrats run free. Now, we're not trying to make this a political issue, brothers and sisters, but basically, I think the time has come that if people can't distinguish between what's right and wrong and different aspects. Now, I personally am an independent, but I'm a conservative. Okay, so I think everybody probably knows that by now. If you don't know that, then I'm sorry I've been hiding that, because I haven't been hiding it. But anyway,
what we're talking about today has nothing to do with politics.
That's right. That's right.
We don't care about the two-party system.
Yeah.
What we do care about is what's going on in the scriptures and what it describes in history. Yeah. And so therefore, when we mention public figures or these issues, we're really talking about historical figures, not their politics and what they believe in. So just make sure you know that.
Exactly. So we're not trying to single out anything. We're just trying to see what matches up with what the Book of Mormon says. So, for example, it talked about sanctuary cities and the rule of law, cities who basically just decide that they're not going to follow the laws. And it's just kind of some pictures of that kind of thing going on there. Condemning the righteous because of their righteousness. And of course, Washington Times talks about the persecution of Christians is on the rise, Americans say. Letting the guilty and the wicked go unpunished because of their money.
Wow.
Now, that might get a little bit political here, but there's this is just an example here, but here we have just ABC News talking about why Hillary Clinton deleted 33,000 emails on her private email server. You have the Justice Department... James Comey deviated from protocol in the Clinton emails probe. Newsweek talks about how Comey drafted a statement ending Clinton email investigations months before even interviewing her. FBI has now confirmed in that case. And there's several other examples here. The Daily Caller, politically weaponized FBI is nothing new, but plenty dangerous, from The Hill. And it says, and moreover, to be held in office at the head of government, to rule and to do according to their wills, that they might get gain and glory of the world. And this is just a chart just showing a presidential financial situation, basically. The figures of how much different presidential, when they first come in, how much they are worth, and then how much they are worth when they leave the presidency. And as you can see, there's a big gap between each one of those. See that, like Richard M. Nixon, basically his personal wealth went up by 650%. Ford went up by 400%. Carter 200%. Reagan 45%. George Bush 475%. Bill Clinton, you can't
off
really
the
see the
charts.
top of that one. It's kind of off the chart there. Okay, and actually this is the entire chart. Bill and Hillary Clinton managed to take their wealth from where they began to where they ended at 6,150% increase in their personal wealth. And again, this is from mainstream media stuff. Washington Post, how the Clintons went from dead broke to rich. Bill earned $104 million just from speeches. How Bill and Hillary Clinton made $240 million in the last 15 years. This is from Forbes. And Fortune talks about the same kind of thing. Town and Country also discusses that. So this is not a secret. This is pretty well known. And that they might the more easily commit adultery. This is talking about how the U.S. leads the way in porn production but falls behind in profits, which is kind of disconcerting that China, South Korea, and Japan are pulling in more money from their porn that the United States is making than the United States is.
What a shame.
Yeah, bad news. And then you got Institute of Family Studies, how we ended up with 40% of children in the United States being born out of wedlock now.
That is a big problem.
That's huge. This is from Deseret News in Salt Lake City. Special report, 1 in 4 Americans don't think that one-night stands count as cheating. 25% of people don't think that a one-night stand is cheating. Of course, we have the thing with Matt Lauer and so forth, and then Anthony Weiner. And for sexting with teenagers, is psychology today is female infidelity on the rise. Is anyone faithful anymore? Infidelity in the 21st century. This is from The Guardian. And Washington Examiner, FBI agent Peter Strzok and Lisa Page exchanged checks. Basically, these were lovers that were involved with the Trump stuff there. So anyway, so they were this is about committing adultery and stealing. Identity theft hit an all-time high in 2016, went up in 2017, has been going up ever since. And to kill, killing, actually, murder rates are way down, have been way down in the United States. But
it won't be that way forever.
After 2 years of increases, the U.S. murder rate officially fell in 2017. So what was this? This doesn't seem to be following the pattern here, right? Until you look at Planned Parenthood killed 321,384 babies in abortions last year, and that was in 2017. This is 2018, and of course it's gone up since then. So Planned Parenthood celebrates the killing of 7.6 million babies in abortions. So actually, abortions is the highest death rate of everything else combined. I mean,
including all the wars and famines.
You take coronavirus. Yep. And you take all of the different things that are killing people on a daily or monthly basis. More children are being killed every day than are being killed by every other cancer, heart failure, and starvation and everything else combined doesn't equal the number of people who die every day being ripped out of their mother's wombs. So
and if you add up the Chinese purges and Russian purges and World War II, World War I, and even also the 1918 Spanish flu, abortion still beats that.
Yeah,
that's how bad that is for human death.
Yep. So this talks about this is FBI signals criminal probe into Planned Parenthood's trafficking of aborted baby parts, and they actually admitted guilt to that, and to do according to their own wills. And we don't have time to get into all this, but this is talking about censorship of conservative voices and conservative platforms and individuals and so forth, and how shadow banning is happening on Twitter and on Facebook and YouTube and et cetera, et cetera.
They're even shadow banning Trump. They've been doing it on Twitter for already 2 years.
Even the President of the United States, they've been basically only allowing what they want to have come through on his stuff.
Just look at the comments that come on after. If you're on Twitter, which... Yep. Some people are, some people aren't. If you're on Twitter, look at Donald Trump's comments after he posts. Look at all the comments below. They're all negative because they manually remove the positive ones.
Yep. So as far as this doing according to their own wills, basically, here we have the Washington Times information and polling that they've done. That liberal professors outnumber conservative professors 12-1. Is anybody really wondering why we have a generation who does not like the United States, believes we are basically the great Satan instead of the promised land of God, and are being ruled by Marxist ideas and understandings, because that's what's taken over the institutes of higher learning many years ago, and that's pretty clear from here. All right. Anyway, so talking about. Okay, that's a little bit about that information. Let me just play for you just really quickly this video that we did. This part of this video right here, which is called Book of Mormon Current as the Daily News. I just want to play the little trailer for this really quickly here. It's about 4 minutes long, so I think you're going to be able to see what's going on.
Can you think of any examples as we go through Mormon's words here in the Book of Mormon, describing what he saw in vision as our day? Behold, I speak unto you as if you were present, and yet you were not. But behold, Jesus Christ has shown you unto me, and I know your doing. And I know that you do walk in the pride of your hearts.
I know of no other writing which sets forth with such clarity the tragic consequences to societies who follow courses contrary to the commandments of God. Its narrative is a chronicle of nations long since gone, but in its descriptions of today's society, it is as current as the daily newspaper and much more definitive, inspired, and inspiring concerning the solutions of those problems.
Now, how many of you would like to hear about a little bit of information that connects some of this information to 9/11? Our most populous city, our icon of America, we're going to build the tallest building on the New York skyline. We want to build the new icon of America. No, that's not good enough. We're going to build 2 of them. We're going to make them look exactly alike. We're going to call them the Twin Towers. There is a growing concern about what's going on in our nation, and for the right reason. The revocation of the Iron Dome, the shield of protection over this nation. Because we all know what happened then on 9/11, when not just one, but both towers were brought to the ground. And the icon of America came down with it. Bricks have fallen down, but we were going to rebuild the hewnstones. And attack directly on our soil, but not just on any soil, on the actual place of the invocation of the covenant. That's what it looked like after 9/11. The bricks had literally been thrown down. They decided, you know what, we have got to do something with this. We're going to show the world we are not going to be knocked down. This is not going to take us out. Not only are we going to rise again, we're going to come back. We're going to come back bigger and stronger and better than we were before. We get to live through the most exciting times. People in all the history of the world have awaited for this day when these things are going to be coming to pass, and we get to be a part of it.
America is great because she is good. If America ever ceases to be good, America will cease to be great.
Second only to testifying of Jesus Christ, the second most important thing that the Book of Mormon does, that it attempts to do, is to warn a very specific nation. I think the brethren know exactly what's going on. I think we have some time left. Let us get our houses in order. Let us get our hearts right. Let us go to the temple and do all the things that we need to be doing, both the outward, the inward stuff.
That's a little bit of a sobering thought here, but the things that we are about to go through in our nation have been prophesied right here in the Book of Mormon, and we're going to get into that now in some depth and detail. So as we go into chapter 7 here, he's given us a pretty interesting some introspection here about what's going on in their civilization, and we can kind of look in what's going on in our civilization, and we can see some of that. One of the interesting things in verse 6, he says, "Now this great iniquity had come upon the Nephites in the space of
not many years."
So this did not take centuries, folks, or even really decades for this as this came through. It happened pretty quickly. And interestingly enough, everything that you just saw in that in this video, this DVD, I was surprised to see that most everything had happened within the last 2 or 3 years, and it's accelerating as far as I can tell. So that's basically because Nephi, he said, his heart was swollen with sorrow in his breast, and he did exclaim in his agony of his soul, "Oh, that I could have been in the days of my father Nephi when he first came out of the land of Jerusalem," because the people were a lot easier to mail over to deal with. This is a guy. Nephi was a guy that got his life threatened several times by his own brothers. He said, "I would rather live in that time than where we're at right here." So then we have Nephi. He preaches upon the tower. The people hear him. He's pouring out his soul to God, and then basically he's telling them that they need to repent and to not harden their hearts and hearken to the voice of the Good Shepherd in verse 18. He says, "Oh, how could you have forgotten?" Verse 20 says, "Oh, how could you have forgotten your God in the very day that He has delivered you? But behold, it is to get gain, to be praised of men, yea, that they might get gold and silver." And that has been, the case in so many instances where the only real focus for a lot of people in their lives is just more and more wealth, and not actually building up humanity and helping the human condition.
Well, that sort of thing is only going to get, it's going to get worse over time. Right now, we still see a lot of good in the world, and we were at a stake conference where we were visited by Elder Bednar. And Elder Bednar, this was in 2017, in fact. And he said to our whole stake, he said, this is the best time the church has ever had. This is the easiest time in missionary work that the church has ever had. And it won't be like that forever, as we're going to see in the next few verses. And as we catch up with a few of the things I talk about with Ezra's eagle and so forth, it's going to change. It's going to be something different.
Yeah, we want to get into that. So in verse 22, it says, "For if you will not repent, behold, this great city and all those great cities which are round about, which are in the land of our possession, shall be taken away." And the Nephites didn't really believe that could even be possible. No, that's not going to happen, right? Because we're powerful. Yeah. Our cities are great. Okay. But he said the Lamanites are going to be in better shape than you are. And then we get into Helaman chapter 8. And did you have anything you wanted to...
Well, let's go ahead and set some stages.
Yes,
let's do a little background.
Perfect.
Right? Because what we're going to cover in the next few minutes here is we're going to overview basically a series of things that happen in the Book of Mormon, things that happened in the Book of Mormon. Well, these types of chapters are an overlay for what will happen in America. Now, I happen to know, and I'll lay the case out before you, that we aren't, we're not fully in Helaman chapter 7 yet. We're a little earlier still. But Helaman chapter 7 is coming up, as well as 3rd Nephi and all the rest are coming up. So, let's go ahead and have a look at this for a sec. I'll make it brief because there are longer videos, longer material on this point that will basically make the case of where we are specifically in the Book of Mormon. But I'll make it brief so you can get the point and then go get the better detail in other videos. All right, so this is, if we can switch to that, this is Ezra's eagle. Now, for those that aren't familiar with Ezra's eagle, I'm going to do a brief overview right now, very quickly. Ezra's eagle. Notice this eagle. It's a weird-looking bird. Look at that for a second. It's got 3 heads. The 3 heads are sleeping. Notice the middle one is bigger than the other 2. See that? It's got really big talons and claws. It's got 2 wings. The left wing has 14 feathers of various lengths, and the right wing has 6 feathers. All short. Can we give a little bit of where did Ezra's eagle come from? What was the foundation of that? Where did that? Ezra's eagle comes out of the old King James Version of the Bible, of the great Apocrypha that was included in the Bible for hundreds and hundreds of years, and then removed in the 1800s, in fact, just after the Civil War. Anyway, this was in there the entire time, but at this point, nobody reads this material. And it's just lost, if you will. But it's still out there. You can still get it. You can buy a little Apocrypha on Amazon and so forth, and you can get that. It's $5 or $10. You can get that Apocrypha and look at it yourself. Make sure you get the King James Version, though, because it was the original King James translation by the King James scholars. I like that better. It matches our Bible. It's the same. So, anyway, this is Ezra. It's recorded in 2nd Ezra chapter 11 and 12. That's where it's recorded. This prophecy is 2 chapters long. Think about that. How many prophecies are ever 2 chapters long?
Revelation has a lot of chapters.
Yeah, Revelations does, but even that's segmented into little parts most of the time. So, anyway, that's what you're looking at is the bird. Now, as we go through this...
So this is what's being described in the book of Ezra.
Yes.
Which is one of the apocryphal works that were originally... And who took it out? Who took it out of the King James Version?
The original person who took it out of the King James Version was... There's good enough.
The Catholic Church, basically?
Was Jerome. Jerome was the one who coined the term Apocrypha and also took the certain books out of the Bible that had been collected as a series of books of the day. He was the compiler of the modern-day Bible, was Jerome. He was the one that ultimately decided what books were going to go in and what books were not. Yeah. And up to that point, all the books were in, essentially. But they were individuals, they're just like one-offs. But then he compiled them and canonized them. And that was meant to be done. It was okay. It's meant to be done. However, he didn't like these particular books he called the apocryphal books simply because he went ahead and decided that the doctrine in them were so outrageous, so different than the other doctrine in the other books that these books don't belong. So he just pushed them aside, put them in the scriptures, but just kind of put them as an end note, saying these are extra books that don't. They're from sources.
Whatever,
yeah, they're from sources, but they don't have a. And he couldn't find them in certain languages. And he says if you can't find them in these old languages, they must not be legitimate. That sort of argument went on back in that day. And but since that day, we have found at least this book and other books in the original Hebrew. And that was the problem. They couldn't find them in Hebrew. They only found them in Greek and Latin and other languages which were more modern in that day. And they didn't think they were that old. Well, this one's old, just like the rest of them.
Wonderful. Okay. That gives you a good background as to why these are legitimately something we could look at. Yeah.
Right. Because, and remember, all this material is recorded, and also the why look at the Apocrypha at all. It goes over the Joseph Smith prophecy on this in Doctrine and Covenants. That's all in the earlier videos. So that's why you can look at the earlier videos on lastdaystimeline.com to check those out. Okay. I'm trying to save time here, so that's where we're cruising. We're cruising.
Yep.
All right. Now, I'm just going to cut to the chase. I want you to go and find this material yourself, okay? Because we're going to save time because it's too much material to cover in an hour anyway, so let's just hit it. All right. Now, as we go through right here, it turns out that these particular feathers, this Ezra's eagle has three phases: the flying phase, the feather phase, and the awakened three-eagle head phase. I know I'm going to drown you in information right now just a little bit, but you can look at other earlier videos and get that too, okay?
Yep.
All right, so it turns out that these feathers link up to the American president since 1929, okay? And during this period of time, the first feather is Herbert Hoover, and there's reasons for that, which we could cover in this maybe a little later. But the second feather is an identification feather. That's Franklin Delano Roosevelt, or FDR. He served 4 terms. Okay, that's 4 is longer than 2 of all the rest of the presidents come after him, with the amendment to the Constitution limiting terms. Okay, term limits. Then there's 2 little feathers, Nixon and John F. Kennedy. And as you know, John F. Kennedy went down by assassination, and Richard Nixon went down by resignation. He resigned before he was impeached. Okay, he never got to that point. And then all the rest of the feathers after them have been long, normal feathers. And the last feather was Barack Hussein Obama. Well, that's an important thing. Now, remember about those short feathers? Well, this is the problem. The short feathers of assassination and resignation, and this is the crux of the whole argument and the whole problem that we're going to see in our future, is that Ezra's eagle shows the last 9 feathers, or if you will, 6 feathers and 3 eagle heads, last 9 presidents of the United States. 9. And the first one is Donald J. Trump. And notice on this picture here, if you can see the picture, all of the feathers are short. Every single one of them. And we're going to talk about, and now let's lay the stage into Helaman, okay? And we're going to do that just briefly so we can go ahead and continue on with our chat into Helaman chapter 7 and continuing. In Helaman, there's a pattern here in Ezra's eagle, okay? And this is also on the website. You can see this as presentation number 2 on the homepage, lastdaystimeline.com. There's a pattern here, okay? So if Donald John Trump goes down, obviously his vice president becomes president, right? Easy enough, just like the other 2 short feathers did in the left wing. By the way, the left wing, right wing thing has nothing to do with politics. It's simply, they have definitions. The left wing was following the orders, if you will, or the siren song of the 3 sleeping eagle heads. And the right wing does it their own way. Catch that? They do it their own way. Yeah. Which that pretty much signifies exactly what Donald Trump's doing it his own way presidency is like. Okay. So, now notice we got 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. Those feathers right there all go down. I'm going to show you the next slide so you can see the pattern here. 1, 2, 3, 4. Those are all short feathers in decreasing time order. So you can set your clock how long Donald Trump has in office. Mike Pence will have less time. And then number 3 will have less time, and number 4 will even have less time than that. Okay? And you're going to see the same pattern show up in Helaman. In the book of Helaman, you see the same pattern. 4 feathers, decreasing time order. Then the 3 eagle heads reign right there after the 4th. They actually rise up and take down 3 and 4, as the prophecy says in Ezra's eagle. And then, of course, you have feathers 5 and 6, and those are migrating feathers. They pretend or start off on the right wing, but then eventually succumb and migrate to under the left wing. They migrate from right to left. So the only thing that happens right there is that they're still short feathers, and they come after the 3 eagle heads, which is still yet future. Okay. All right. So at this point, let's go ahead and jump into Helaman, because then you've got the pattern down, right? You're looking for 4 short leaders in a row that have decreasing time order, then 3 bad guys rule, and then 2 little short feathers after that. Okay. So let's go ahead and have a look. If you turn back with me to Helaman chapter 2. All right, now we're on 7 now, but we're going to go turn back to 2.
Back to 2.
Yeah, back to 2.
Yep.
Helaman chapter 2. When you get back there.
It's page 347 in the annotated book of Mormon, if you're following along in the annotated book.
Good. All right. Now, at this particular time, look at verse 1. Okay, remember, this is just after the big wars that happened in the Nephi lands. All right. All right, so we have a big contested election. Number 1, look at this. There was no one to fill the judgment seat halfway through. Therefore, they began to be a contention again among the people concerning who should fill the judgment seat. And it came to pass that Helaman, who was the son of Helaman, was appointed to fill the judgment seat by the voice of the people. So he's elected. Contentious election. And as you continue on, you'll see that there's the Gadianton robbers, and they get their Kishkumen. This is the first chapter where you see Kishkumen. Okay, he starts showing up. Okay, then you start seeing Kishkumen trying to take down Helaman. This is Helaman, son of Helaman, or Helaman III, if you will. And ultimately, this is the chapter that talks about the guard of Helaman, gives him the little sign, and then they go ahead and realize that what he wants to do, and then he slays the guy, and then he doesn't come home, so Gadianton rushes off and takes the whole band in the mountains or somewhere else, right? Mm-hmm. That's the chapter that does that, okay? In other words, the Gadiantons are on the run. Catch that? The Gadiantons are on the run. And then it says, in the next chapter, it says there's a fleet to land northward with Hagoth, but also that there's a huge, like a mini golden age, if you will, for the Nephites at this time. Also the mini golden age for the church. Isn't that interesting? Church, and at the same time this. Now I'm going to switch over and show you the slide that will show that material right here. Okay. What I did is I went ahead and listed all of the chief judges of all of the judges in the Nephite lands, how long they were in office, their dates in the calendar with our dates, if we could get it that close. What happened to them? How did they end their reign in office, right? As well as some notes, significant moments in their judgeships. And then I didn't notice anything until I got down to number 6 there, Helaman III. He reigned 11 years. He died in office. There's a mini golden age in the church and the economy for the Nephites. He was attempted assassination by Kishkumen. We already went over that. It was the Gadiantons are on the run, and then Hagoth takes off. That's what significant moments happen in his life, or in his judgeship. Now look at the next one for a moment, because we're going in the future. We're going to catch up to modern time. Okay. Number 7, Nephi the third reigns. He's a prophet. He reigns for 9 years. Notice that's less than 11, right? Mm-hmm. He resigns to go preach, okay? And because the people start to get wicked again. Okay, so in other words, who's a religious man that's second in command, if you will, right now, that is right next to Trump? Who's that, Rod?
Sounds like Pence to me.
Sounds like Mike Pence, right? So right here, this is the Book of Mormon now, current as the evening news, is telling us that in our near future, something happens to Donald Trump. Who knows what that is? But that Mike Pence takes over, and when he does, he resigns. That's what it says. He resigns. So he's the one that resigns of all the people that do that. Now watch what happens next. Remember the pattern we're looking for? 4, then 3, and then 2 at the end. Caesorum takes over. That's C-E-Z. Caesorum, or Caesorum, if you like. He reigns only for 4 years. He's assassinated by secret combinations coming to the top. And he's a short 1 year as a chief judge. It's very short. He's got 4 years as chief judge, but he's got a short chief judgeship, if you will. And then number 9, the son of Caesorum. They don't even mention his name. It's so short. He reigns for less than 1 year. He's also assassinated by secret combinations, moving for the top. And he only had a few months in the judgeship. So there's 4 leaders, go down in order, and they have decreasing time order in their time as the secret combinations rise to the top. Now, what happens next in the story? I think we're almost to chapter 7. Let's go from there.
All right. So this is where he's now talking about all of these different, the debaucheries, the sin and so forth that's going on in their civilization. Then he's making predictions here. He says that these great cities are going to be destroyed if we don't repent. In chapter 8. He says, verse 20 says, "Now it came to pass that when Nephi had said these words, behold, there were men who were judges who also belonged to the secret band of Gadianton, and they were angry. They cried out against him, saying unto the people, Why do you not seize upon this man and bring him forth, that we may condemn him, according to the crime which he's done? Why seest thou this man, and hearest him revile against his people and against our laws?" Because Nephi had spoken unto them concerning the corruptness of their laws. And anyway, then it goes into how there's these secret works of darkness that are going on. And then again, that he's prophesying that our great cities will be taken from us. That's impossible. We are powerful, and our cities are great. Therefore, our enemy can have no power over us. A little overconfident there, I'd say.
Yeah.
So the Nephite nation thinks that they're basically indestructible. They have reached a pinnacle of their society, and they think that there's no way anybody's going to take us down. And then so they raised up contentions among them in verse 7. Wow, that's interesting. Contention going on. Where there were some who did cry out, "Let this man alone, for he is a good man. Don't mess with him. He's okay," and so forth. But anyway, so there was this back and forth that was going on. Then he talks about how there were several prophets who testified about Christ. In verse 14. Says he's actually talking about how Moses. He's reiterating how the Lord has worked with the people of God in the past, and he says, Did he not bear record that the Son of God should come? He should be lifted up as a brazen serpent in the wilderness. Even so, he shall be lifted up on those who shall come.
In other words, the argument wasn't about religion. The argument was about, and remember, this is a bunch of judges who don't believe in religion, arguing with Nephi, who was at that point the head of the church, the prophet. Okay, he hasn't received the sealing power yet, but it's coming up. So at this point, these are people who are arguing about religion, but they're not religious, right? And what are they arguing about? Will the Son of God come?
Yeah.
Will something that is prophesied take place? It's always the same thing in the Book of Mormon. It's always argument. They don't believe in the Son of God because they don't believe in prophecy.
And this is before Samuel Lamanites come.
Oh yeah, this is before that point.
Is before that. So I just wanted to make one pointing out thing. We talked about the serpents there, and it says, "And as many as would look upon the serpent should live." The serpent is a representation of what? As I've talked to groups and so forth, and whenever I ask that question, they say, "Well, the serpent is representation of Satan." I say, well, actually,
opposite.
It's not Satan; it's Christ. Okay. I go, wait a minute, and I personally think serpents are weird. Okay, just because I don't like them. Okay, but
Don't like snakes.
no, don't really like snakes. But in this particular case, I mean, there's some really interesting implications here because basically the serpent was put on the pole by Moses, and he'd hold the pole up. Those who would look to the serpent would live. And he says, and as many as would look upon, even so, as many should look upon the Son of God with faith, having a contrite spirit, might live even unto that life which is eternal.
And if you even look at some of the medical symbolism today, if you look at medical symbols, you'll see that it is a snake on a pole.
Yeah, exactly. And there's more we could go into about the serpent, but I think that's an interesting factor because one of the archaeological features that we find a lot in the Hopewell Mound Builder civilization as serpents. The Great Serpent Mound is a great example of that. Okay, so let's jump over here to verse 21 for just a second here of chapter 8. It says, "And now will you dispute that Jerusalem was destroyed? Will ye say that the sons of Zedekiah were not slain, all except it were Mulek? Yea, and do ye not behold that the seed of Zedekiah are with us, and they were driven out of the land of Jerusalem?" Now, this is an interesting little feature. This is going to get off a little bit off of the Ezra's Eagle time frame information here, but it does have some interesting implications. If you go over to page 363.
Oh, yeah, I think what he's going for, I mean, there's the part about Zedekiah, but then there's the part about Jerusalem, right?
Yeah.
So he's saying that if this prophecy was fulfilled, because we've got word from people at Jerusalem who came over here called the Mulekites, if we got word from them that Jerusalem was destroyed, and that prophecy came from your forefathers, Lehi,
then
why can't Christ come too?
Why can't we trust it?
That's right.
Yeah, we should be able to trust this because we know that this happened because the Mulekites made it over here.
And Lehi and Nephi were both calling for Christ to come as well. So if that one prophecy came to pass, how come this one can't come to pass either?
Yeah. So the thing that a lot of scholars have wondered though about, James, and that is that well, wait a minute. But according to the history, Zedekiah, after the fall of Jerusalem, Zedekiah and all of his sons were basically gathered together. King Nebuchadnezzar, the Babylonian Empire, they took King Zedekiah. They had him stand and watch as they executed each one of his sons one after the other. So and then right after that, then they put his eyes out. So the last thing that he would ever see in this life is his sons dying.
Oh,
I mean, this is how brutal it can get, right?
Yeah.
And there was never any mention of any Mulek as being one of the sons. And so people said, well, see, there's the Book of Mormon, can't be real because if he really did have a son by the name of Mulek, he would have been right there with the other sons.
But what if?
Exactly. But what if Mulek wasn't born yet? What if he was actually still in the gestation period, and his mother, which they had obviously she was one of the king's wives probably, and she would have had finances and so forth. They were right there by Phoenicia, which is where the greatest seafaring people hailed out of, and so forth. And so there's a very good chance that maybe Mulek could have been hitched in a ride in his mommy's tummy, as she got a ride with the Phoenicians, and then came across the Mediterranean Sea, which the Phoenicians had all kinds of ports there, specifically one at Carthage, which is a big one, and if they left from there and went. And brothers and sisters, I just want to tell you just really, really quickly here, because this is. If I know that some of you probably have heard of the Phoenicia expedition. We talked about that in the beginning of these podcasts with the ship that actually proved Lehi's ocean voyage. What a lot of people don't realize is just this year, in 2020, that ship just finished up another voyage at the beginning of this year, going from Carthage in a 600 BC replica ship. And they sailed it down past the Canary Islands, and in literally just a few weeks actually made it here to what's actually Puerto Rico, and today it's actually sitting in Florida right now.
So it is possible to sail a relatively small ship across the ocean.
Yes, across the Atlantic Ocean, and now this is speculation here, folks, but basically, if they would have done that, and instead of stopping at Puerto Rico, which is where this ship actually first came up on the there. If they continued on up into the Gulf Coast area of the United States, sailed along the coast until they saw a huge river coming out, which was basically emptying the entire interior of America, which is this Mississippi River at New Orleans. And then they basically began to sail. The Mississippi River is interesting because although it basically is coming south, the prevailing winds often go north. And they literally could sail up the Mississippi River until they couldn't get the ship any further, which is basically the first place that happens. Is
shallow spot.
The Des Moines Rapids, which is right by Nauvoo.
Yep.
So they could actually sail up the Mississippi River that far until they couldn't sail any further. And then that's when we believe that the Lord basically said, okay, that's enough. You can't get the ship any further. Establish the land here on the west side of the river, which they did basically and called it Zarahemla. So there's a little bit of background there. But basically, in page 363 in the annotated Book of Mormon, Orson Pratt actually talks about this. Of course, he was one of the early brethren that worked alongside with Joseph Smith. He said, the American Indians are partly of the children of Manasseh, though many of them are of Ephraim, through the two sons of Ishmael, which came out of Jerusalem 600 years before Christ. So this is where some of the Ephraim came from, is through Ishmael's sons. And some of Judah, through the loins of David and the kings that reigned over Jerusalem. When Zedekiah, the king of Judah, was carried away captive into Babylon, the Lord took one of his sons, whose name was Mulek, with a company of those who would hearken unto his words. Do you have a comment you want to make about that?
Hearken unto his words. Meaning they were led. They were led just like the Nephites, just like the Jaredites. The Mulekites were led just as well.
Yep. I brought them over the ocean and planted them in America. This was done in fulfillment of the 22nd and 23rd verses of the 17th chapter of Ezekiel. And the 17th chapter of Ezekiel reads, Thus saith the Lord God, I will also take the highest branch, that's Zedekiah, of the high cedar, which is basically the Jews, and will set it. I will cross off from the top of his young twigs a tender one. That's why we're kind of thinking maybe he was so tender, meaning that he maybe wasn't even born yet. He was still in his mother's womb. And I will plant it upon an high mountain and eminent. In the mountain of the height of Israel will I plant it, and it shall bring forth boughs and bear fruit and be a goodly cedar, and under it shall dwell all fowl of every wing. In the shadow of the branches thereof they shall dwell. Then Orson Pratt continued on. He says, by reading this chapter, it will be seen that the Jews were the high cedar, that Zedekiah, the king, was the highest branch, and the tender one, cropped off from the top of his young twigs, was one of his sons, whom the Lord brought out and planted him and his company upon the choice land of America, which he had given unto a remnant of the tribe of Joseph for an inheritance, in fulfillment of the blessing of Jacob and Moses upon the head of that tribe. So this is this is talking about the tribe of Joseph. And now we've already talked about this again in previous podcasts, but Joseph did not get an inheritance in the old world. His inheritance was to be a land which was above all other lands. It was a special promised land. A better land. And that land of Joseph is actually the United States. And I just want to point out this is from, let's see, where are we at here? There we go, right there. Okay. This is actually from President Russell M. Nelson in the Quorum of the 12 Apostles and Mission President's address that he did in 2016. And he says, the Book of Mormon reveals that the inheritance of Joseph, the son of Israel, was not forgotten when land was distributed to the tribes of Israel. Because he didn't get one in Israel, right? As promised in the Abrahamic covenant. Joseph's inheritance was to be a land that's choice above all others. It was choice not because of its beauty or wealth of natural resources, although it very well could have that, but it was choice because it was chosen to be the repository of sacred writings on gold plates from which the Book of Mormon would one day come. So what nation is that had a repository for gold plates which the Book of Mormon came from?
That would be the place where Cumorah is.
That's right. That's right. And also this nation was choice because it would eventually host the world headquarters of the restored Church of Jesus Christ in Latter Days, and that was in America. And it was choice because it is a land of liberty for those who worship the Lord and keep his commandments. So here President Nelson gives us 3 qualifications or qualifiers of the land that is being talked about, this land of Joseph. And, of course, this is the land of Joseph that Joseph Smith was talking about here with Orson Pratt. This is the land of America. Yep. So I wanted to just bring that out as an understanding here that Mulek was brought to the land of Joseph, and that this and America is that land, and that's why he was brought out, not on accident, but on purpose. Everyone
comes here on purpose.
That's right. That's right. So now we have, in verse 27, we have Nephi, Prophet Nephi foretells an assassination of the judgment seat, and that his brother did it.
And this is getting right back to Ezra's eagle.
Yes. Okay, so we'll go ahead and take you back. Go ahead and take it from there.
All right, so let's just read this piece just for a sec. Remember, we all know this. We've read the Book of Mormon before. We know this piece. This is a very classic piece. So let's look at it again. Yea, behold, it is now even at your doors. Yea, go ye unto the judgment seat, and search, and behold, your judge is murdered. And he lieth in his blood, and he hath been murdered by his brother, who seeketh to sit upon the judgment seat. Ah, the wicked are killing the wicked now. Mm-hmm. Remember what Nephi was lamenting in his garden tower. Remember that? He was lamenting that the judgment seat had been taken over by the Gadiantons. And now the Gadiantons are bumping each other off, right? That's exactly what it is.
It's turf wars.
Well, turf wars. I mean, they're on the same team, but they're wicked or killing the wicked. Okay, and behold, they both belong to your secret band. There it is again, whose author is Gadianton, the evil one who seeketh to destroy the souls of men. Now let's resume back to this piece here on the side. There we go. Yep, slide. All right, now, after they kill and assassinate these two, the Gadiantons kill these two on the way to the top. Caesorum, which you just saw bumped off here, or murdered, assassinated, was also assassinated. Okay, so he killed the two going up, or at least men around him did, and put him in power, and then he was killed himself. This would represent the first of the 3 eagle heads that are in Ezra's eagle. There's 3 in a row. 1, 2, and 3, the big one. Caesorum, which you know this story by heart. I know you do. That Caesorum, S-E-E, Zoram, is the first eagle head in Ezra's eagle. Now, what happens next? There's 21 years of missing data, but Nephi the third there is giving the sealing power of Christ in the same period of time, and he says that the Gadiantons are still ruling the government, which means there's 21 years there. That's more than enough for 2 bad guys to sit in there. So that's where we're at in that part of thing. So let's have a recap. So at the beginning, we've got 3. We got Helaman III represents Donald Trump. We've got the many golden age of unprecedented economic wealth and prosperity in the economy, which I think we hit that one. I think we checked that box. The second of the 4 chief judges, a righteous man that is very religious, that man resigns. We are not there yet. That's yet future, obviously. The 4 chief judges before the first Gadianton ruler have decreasing time order of 11, 9, 4, and 1. The Gadiantons murder their way to the top, especially the last 2 very short chief judges. And then look at this. The first of the Gadianton chief judges, Caesorum, is assassinated by his brother in an attempt to seize control of the judgment seat. We just read it. The wicked kill the wicked. And for 21 years after Caesorum, the Gadiantons are more entrenched in government leaderships. And the Gadiantons, after their takeover, fight amongst themselves and have a wider civil war, which that comes up in Helaman 10, 11, somewhere in there. We'll get there in a second. Mm-hmm. Do you see this? It all lines up.
That is amazing. Yeah, wow. So Nephi, in this particular verses, so he basically tells them that this is going to happen. They go and they check, and sure enough, they are. The guys that find him are completely overwhelmed because of the fact that he was right, and they wanted to basically show that he was wrong. They were still kind of in their befuddlement, if you will, when they're caught and they're thrown in jail. They throw them in prison, and say,
we found the 5 guys
must be the guys.
Yep.
And then they gather the people together and says, "Well, where's those 5 guys?" Well,
we got 5 guys in prison.
Yeah. So they bring him back out and they testify that this is what they found, and then they say, well, there's no way that Nephi could have known that unless he was like in cahoots with them as conspirators, co-conspirators. He had a co-conspirator that had done this, and so then Nephi says, "Well, you know what? Tell you what,
I'll give you another prophecy.
Give you another hint. You go to his brother's house, which his name is Siantum, and you basically ask him this series of questions, and I'll tell you what he's going to answer." So you ask him this, he's going to answer that. You ask him this, he's going to answer that. And at the end, he's basically saying, you're guilty. And he's going to confess.
Look at the blood on his cloak.
Yeah, and he's going to confess, yeah, I did it. And then you will know. And all of a sudden, surprisingly enough, people start believing Nephi.
There's a revival that goes on at that point.
Yeah. Because of that, yep. Nephi is a prophet. That's in verse 40. Then we go into chapter 10. Okay, and Nephi then goes away from his house. A voice comes to him, and basically this is a really interesting aspect, because this was obviously recorded by Nephi himself, because he's giving what the Lord said to him personally, and Mormon is essentially just putting this in kind of verbatim
in first person.
Yeah, in first person. So he says, blessed art thou, Nephi, for those things which thou hast done. He says, thou hast not feared them, and hast not sought thine own life, but hast sought my will, and to keep my commandments. And I love that. I mean, what better thing can we do, brothers and sisters, than to not worry so much about our own wills and what we want to accomplish and what we want to have done. What's God's will for me to do?
Yep.
And I'm going to obey the commandments, just to make sure that I'm worthy to receive the inspiration and the guidance that the Lord has for me. And what's the result of doing that? He says, you'll be blessed forever, and I'll make thee mighty in word and in deed. And of course, that is exactly what happens. And as an example of that, he's told to basically go in verse 11, and now behold, I command you that you should go and declare unto this people, and thus saith the Lord God, who is the Almighty, except ye repent, ye shall be smitten even unto destruction. So here he's basically telling them this is going to get bad for us if we don't repent.
And Nephi doesn't even stop to go back to his own house. He just goes right on a mission straight.
Yeah. Yep. Doesn't even stop. I mean, it's pretty amazing. That's what you call immediate obedience. And that's what we're going to need to have, brothers and sisters, I think, if we're going to make it through the things that are coming up in this latter days. If we want to have spiritual power, but he doesn't have just even spiritual power. Listen to this. This is amazing. It's verse 16. Behold, the power of God was with him, and they could not take him to cast him into prison, for he was taken by the Spirit and conveyed away out of the midst of them.
Yeah.
Here they're trying to take him to prison, apparently, and he just like, poof.
That's just the same thing that Jesus did.
That's right.
The same exact
on the
miracle.
Mountain. Yeah.
When
outside of Nazareth.
Got a whole bunch of a mob was going to cast him over the side of the mountain. He just vanished out of their midst. He did the same thing a second time when he was going to be stoned for saying he was the great I am. He did the exact same thing when he said, before Abraham, I am. And then they went up to pick the rocks and stone him, and then he was gone. He was vanished. And it's the same type of miracle here.
Yeah. And 11 verse 17, it says, and it came to pass that he did go forth in the Spirit from multitude to multitude. Now, I don't know exactly if that meant that the Spirit guided him from one place to the other, or if he was literally like kind of transported, just like whew, over here and whew, over there. We don't know.
It's ambiguous from the scripture, but it looks like go forth in the Spirit from multitude to multitude. It does look like he was, I guess, you could use the word teleporting, I guess, but I don't know.
Yeah,
I'm just reading the.
I kind of thought that the sound effect was pretty cool. Over there. Yeah. Okay, and he until he had declared it unto them all, or sent it forth among all the people. And it came to pass that they would not hearken unto his words, and there began to be contentions again. And so they were divided against themselves and began to slay one another with the sword. Now, that's an interesting factor. Basically, some of the things that have been happening in our nation just in the last few weeks.
Rioting.
The rioting and so forth, and looting and so forth. But it hasn't really come to just, actual, combat yet.
Not yet, but...
been some killings, but not really
I can say
combat.
that's probably on the way. I mean, the people are too close with too many guns. At this point, they're too close.
Yeah.
I mean, what was it, last week? I don't know when you see this, it might be next year. We don't know when you're going to watch this, right? But
yeah,
I mean, just last week there was a news report of a rather wealthy lawyer who actually was siding with the Black Lives Matter people, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's great.
In St. Louis.
Yeah. And he never had a gun in his life, from what I read. He went out and bought a gun, stood in the long line of to get a gun. He had an AR-15, and his wife had a pistol. And there's a mob of 80 to 100 people walking down their road, and he wouldn't want his house to be burglarized or vandalized or anything. So he walked out in the front and stood there with his gun pointing at the crowd. That is too close.
Yeah, that's
What
happening.
if that guy had his finger on the trigger because he was an inexperienced gun owner and didn't have it pointed? What if he had his finger on the trigger and accidentally pulled it? Or what if the gun just had a light trigger? What if anything could happen?
Yeah.
That's bad news.
Or if a bunch of people rushed him,
Yeah,
like
or if there was anybody who, stepped out of line a little bit and he did it. I mean,
they just barely torn down
that's
a metal
bad
gate
news.
to come into this gated community. So I mean, they were up to really no good. As
they were going
you
up to
can tell.
the governor's house is where they were going, which is that's fine, but that the whole thing is just too close.
But that could erupt into something really huge, and we don't know if that's going to happen between now and when this actually airs or whatever. But we are in a serious situation. They just a couple of days ago they just put down the Chaz or CHOP or whatever they called it up in Seattle, which was a autonomous zone. Basically, they were claiming a new nation carved out of our nation, and then making all kinds of demands against our nation. That these couple of thug leaders, whatever,
The rapper leader.
Yeah, the rapper.
Rapper.
Yeah. Well, because that's the most important thing, really.
Yeah, he was a rapper.
If you're a rapper, then you got power and authority.
Yeah.
Anyway, so there you go. So that's
And the only reason Chop and Chaz, or whatever you want to call it, came down was because the day before they were threatening the mayor to actually go after him.
Yeah, they went to her house, and then all of a sudden she realized that, oh my goodness, yeah, this is a problem. So it's time. We're done. We're done playing. It kind of reminds me of the guy that was saying, burn it all down on his text messages. And then when people were actually at the gates of his gated community, he's like, get the cops out here. What are you doing? How come they're not showing up? So I think it's interesting that those who have wanted to take away the right of people to take advantage of the Second Amendment, basically to defend themselves with guns, and say, well, you don't need guns. That's what we have the police for.
And then
Isn't it
they
interesting the same people wanted to defund and abolish the police?
Right.
Sounds like those people really are people who want really anarchy.
They
don't want law and order.
The real problem here is lack of law and order.
That's right.
Right? There is nothing wrong with protesting. We are Americans. We were built on protesting.
That's right.
I mean, everybody. We do it on a regular basis here, and we love it. We love going to the Capitol and showing our signs and amassing in huge crowds and then telling the government what we feel. And that is a right by the Constitution. Yeah. But looting, rioting, theft, destruction of property, murder of police officers in defense of other people who are trying to instill law and order, that is immoral. And that is what the Constitution is against, and that's what the Book of Mormon is against.
Yep. And this continued in Helaman chapter 11. Basically, because this slaying was going on, so Nephi actually calls down a God-induced thing to try to calm them down a little bit. How about you don't have any food to eat?
Yep.
So he calls down a famine, and the famine got so bad, basically, that they actually stopped fighting, which is kind of interesting. But they started to perish by the thousands in the more wicked parts of the land, and they began to remember the Lord their God. When you're starving to death and you're watching your family and friends starve to death because of a lack of food, it tends to get your attention.
So does that also mean that because we have a timeline now where we are, that we can expect maybe, possibly, a major famine happening in the second Eagle Head time period? I look at this as I'm reading the news. You see this DVD?
This is the news.
You see this DVD? I'm taking this literally.
Yeah, and so am I.
Let's look at this and see, where are we in this timeline? Right now we're in Helaman chapter 2. Helaman chapter 10 and 11. Does that look like a famine? Yes. Can we look at that and say maybe it's going to happen?
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah, and then when the famine gets bad enough, then basically the prophet Nephi importunes the Lord basically to end the famine. In verse 10, O Lord, behold, this people has repented, and they've swept away that band of Gadianton from amongst them, insomuch that they have become extinct, and they have concealed their secret plans on the earth.
They buried him again. But they dig him up in just a few chapters.
This is just like, it's just horrible. I mean, they keep getting rid of him, and it just keeps coming back.
Yep.
It's like a bad dream or something. I mean, it's just oh man, it's just horrible.
Well,
Okay.
It's because Lucifer uses them. It
Yeah.
works for him.
Yeah.
That's why it comes back.
And plus, all these things are happening in such a compressed time frame. You have the 71st year, the 72nd year here in the beginning of chapter 11. It goes through the 73rd, 74th, and 75th year, just in those couple of verses there. So you're actually in the 76th year. So this is just within a few years. So these people haven't forgotten. They know what this Gadianton stuff was about. And even though they got humbled and kind of returned and repented, they still remember this stuff, which is why it's so easy for it to come back again over and over again and raise its ugly head again, to fall upon them again. As
Also,
Nephites.
there's evidence here that shows that in America's future, because that's where we're going with all of this.
Yeah.
In America's future, Gadiantonship, if you will become popular. That will be a shame.
Yeah. So then we have in the 76th year, the reign of the judges, you have the Nephites and Lamanites prosper. There's a rebuilding. This is because it got so bad there for a while that that was laying waste their cities and so forth. So they had to rebuild. So in verse 20, thus it did come to pass that the people of Nephi began to prosper again in the land and began to build up their waste places. In other words, the places that got wasted before, and began to multiply and spread, and they went from north and so forth. And the more part of the people, both the Nephites and the Lamanites, did belong to the church. So there was kind of a great revival in this case again. And these revivals and these things are happening literally in 4 or 5 year time frames back and forth. It's pretty amazing how fast people fall out.
But it looks like they can, in the same verse, 22, the next one, they had contention over just a few little points of doctrine.
You have a couple of years there, 77, 78, and 79 of the years of the reign of the judges. And there began to be much strife then in 79. And then guess who appears again? The Gadiantons appear again as the band of robbers, the dissenters of the people of Nephi. Now I find that this really fascinating. Mm-hmm. It's not the Lamanites primarily that are instigating this Gadiantonship. It's basically the covenant people. They are dissenters from the Nephite civilization, and they basically there's a certain number who are the real descendants of the Lamanites, but they basically use them as an excuse. There's a few of the Lamanites being stirred up to anger by them, or those who were the dissenters. Therefore, they commenced a war with their brethren. So they got. Essentially, sounds to me like they got a few of these Lamanites to kind of go along with it, but really it was being fueled primarily by the dissenters of the Nephites.
Yep.
Now, isn't that an interesting thing as you compare it to what's been going on in our nation here recently?
Americans that
most of the people in these riots and so forth, they weren't black people. They were by far and away. It's the vast majority of them are actually spoiled white kids.
Well, it takes all types. I mean,
yeah. Well, there's a whole group.
All you can do is look at pictures and guess.
Yeah.
But,
yeah. Exactly.
It takes all types.
Yeah. And they would do this. They would retreat in the mountains and in the wilderness, their secret places, their hiding places. They were kind of hiding among them to some extent. It sounds like some of it was outside.
You see, the Gadiantons, the first time before they buried those plans, took off. They were internal to the government. This time, they tried again, but they tried to get people to come away from the Nephites into a secret location up in the mountains. And I'm assuming that would be Appalachian Mountains. In our location areas, I don't know where in the Appalachians, but somewhere heavy, maybe. I'm not gonna guess. I don't want any good state with this stuff.
The Blue Ridge Mountains.
Yeah, somewhere up there.
Yep.
And they sally forth to come to the plains later and attack the settlements of the Nephites. They won't attack Zarahemla, of course, because it's too far away and too big. But they attack the settlements in the outlying areas.
Yeah, and it says in verse 26, they became, in the space of not many years, became an exceedingly great band of robbers. And they did search out all the secret plans of Gadianton, and thus they became the robbers of Gadianton. And these robbers did make great havoc, yea, even great destruction among the people of Nephi and also the people of the Lamanites. Now, the Lamanites that they're talking about here, in one of the previous verses, it actually talks about that these Lamanites were not the outside Lamanites. These are the Lamanites who had joined with the Nephites. So this is basically the people of Ammon. Essentially, the anti-Nephi Lehites, basically, and those other Lamanites who had come with them, and they've had some wars, and some of those prisoners had joined with the Nephites and so forth. They decided that they didn't want to get killed.
There must not have been a lot of those left because back in Helaman chapter 3, something like that, Hagar took a lot of the people of Ammon to the far north.
Yeah.
When he took off into wherever he went.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. So you have basically then in verse 28, they sent an army of strong men into the wilderness and upon the mountains to search out this band of robbers and destroy them. They were driven back because God doesn't, generally speaking, occasionally it has happened, but generally speaking, God does not allow offensive wars. He says, you defend yourself. And
I
that's
don't
cool.
think of any. Actually, there's one time he does do offensive.
There is a couple of
wars.
offensive wars.
I'm thinking about it. Yes, he does.
Yeah, but generally speaking, he doesn't allow offensive wars. And here's an example of that here in verse 30. In the commencement of the 81st year did he go forth again against this band of robbers and did destroy many. They were also visited with much destruction, and they were obliged again to return to out of the wilderness and out of the mountains to their own lands because of the exceeding greatness of the numbers of these robbers who infested the mountains and the wilderness. So they basically got beaten back the second time. And the robbers did still increase and wax strong, insomuch that they defy the whole armies of the Nephites and also the Lamanites. And they did cause great fear to come unto the people until upon all the face of the land. In other words, they were not a governmental. They weren't trying to take over the government. They were outside of any government. They were just a band of robbers who had figured out how to plunder and steal and so forth.
And they took captive women and children into slavery.
Yep.
Well, in the end of 33, which
yep.
When you look at what the motives operandi and what they were doing, it looks like they established a really big Chaz.
Yeah,
that's exactly what it looks like.
They established their own deal.
So we're gonna have our own place over here, and we're just
in fact later on they actually start to call the leader of their band a governor.
Right, and he wanted to establish a king over him.
Yep.
The Gadiantans always want a king. In other words, if you look at kingships, there's a video on our website which everybody should see. It's a really short video, 10 minutes. It's on. You can go to the lastdaystimeline.com at the top and go to free videos and look at the one that says oligarchies versus democracies versus republics. And in that particular video, it shows exactly what anarchy does. Anarchy is never a solid form of anything. It's just a transition period between democracy to an oligarchy. And it shows it here too. Yeah. And the point that they eventually establish an oligarchy around one person. Kingship doesn't exactly exist. It's always an oligarchy. And oligarchy is formed. That's the point that even here it's showing the same thing.
Yeah, that's good. That's an excellent point. Now in verses 35 through 36, it goes through year 81, 82, 83, and 84. So it's just boom, and just those couple of verses. It goes all the way up to basically the 85th year of the reign of the judges, which happens to now be 7 years before Christ comes.
And now we get to Laconius.
Yep.
And now let's look at Ezra's eagle for this point for a sec here. All right. Now, the last two short feathers. Now, we've gone through our three eagle heads. See the image there on the left? We've gone through our three eagle heads. They're done. They're out, right? In Nephi timeline and Ezra's eagle here. Now we're getting to the last two. The last two are short feathers that start on the right, but they move over to the left. That's why they call migrating short feathers, okay? Now, in the Book of Mormon, I would consider Laconius a really good one. But yet, he is assassinated. And we really don't know his politics. We only know he saved him from Gadiantans. We don't know his politics or anything about it. Also, the last one doesn't really mention his name very much either, I think. But there's two of them, and they both are murdered. Okay, so when you think of it that way, there's two left, and then the destruction of the Nephites. There's two left, the destruction of Ezra's eagle again. And as you can tell, it is lining up directly with America as well.
All right, so this basically wraps it up here for us for this particular thing. We are going to go into Laconius here. This will be in 2 weeks from now, just so you know where that's going to be coming in. So we are excited about having you here, and tell you what, we can hardly wait for the next 2 months, 2 weeks till we get to Laconius.
Oh yeah,
Laconius. And what's going on with that? Yeah, because there's some great things to show you and tell you about that as well, folks. But listen, thank you for joining us, and hope we're going to you're enjoying all of these podcasts. Again, this is the Come Follow Me. You can go to Come Follow Me 2020. You can go to bookofmormonevidence.org, and it's right there as well. We like to really encourage you to give us a thumbs up and like this so that we can get more people, and also share it with your friends. If this is something you're finding is interesting, share the link. Let them know where this is. These are free podcasts. They're free to you. Obviously, that we have a lot of costs that are involved with these things and putting these together and making these, getting them edited and everything like that. I want to thank Mike and Nancy James for all their efforts in putting these together, and those who continue to support us with getting the annotated Book of Mormon and the DVDs and so forth. We've also decided that this September we're not going to be able to have our big conference again because of the restrictions on crowds and so forth that are expected to be still there.
But we will be online, and we will have an awesome presentation again. I tend to make these awesome presentations at these conferences, so I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, we're going to have a good time. So it's going to be a virtual conference. So if you're not familiar with that already, just go on to the bookofmormonevidence.org, which is the overall umbrella website that has links to everything else as far as our stuff is concerned. And thanks again, James T. Prout.
James T. Prout.
Prout. Did I say Pratt? I said Pratt, didn't I?
Close enough.
Okay. Well, you kind of remind me of like Orson Pratt or, Pratt.
Oh, right. That's
Pratt.
true. That's true. Yeah, that's
true. On in there. Okay. Thanks, everybody, and we'll see you next week.
We're excited to announce the 26th International Book of Mormon Evidence Conference, September 25th and 26th, with special guests Glenn Beck, Tim Ballard, and David Barton. And you can watch from any device. Tickets can be found at bookofmormonevidencestreaming.com. If you'd like to know more about lastdaystimeline.com, go to the website and you can see how his work digests whole prophecies to match the elements that are overlapping to form a clear timeline of the last days, including Daniel, Ezra, Nephi, Moroni, Jesus in 3rd Nephi, Isaiah, John, Joel, Ezekiel, Joseph Smith, and the modern prophets as well. You can also see one of the books, The President Makers, How Billionaires Control U.S. and Foreign Policy by Don Fotheringham on his website, as well as many other resources.